Yeah, hello everyone. Let me know if this is loud enough. I can speak louder if necessary. So I'll just start with a confession. I love touching things, can't really help it. There's something about objects that has this tactile fascination for me. Like, for example, when we look at this random collection of design chairs and sofas, they all have this certain ineffable tactile quality, like as a sort of aesthetic experience of tactility. But how and why do these pieces affect us in a tactile way? So my name is Sophie Declerck. I'm from Belgium, but I'm a doctoral student in the Institute for Design Innovation at Loughborough University in London. My PhD project focuses on aesthetics, sensory design, and human experience. So I'm basically trying to learn how the tactile works in the interaction between people and design objects. So what is tactility? How does it affect us? How is it evoked? And in a world where touch has become both taboo and also a necessary condition of well-being, how can we think about tactile aesthetic experiences with material things? So okay, so touch, the sense of touch it defies definition. It can't be reduced to this very clear sense or to an organ made up of various receptors and pathways or to either sensation or perception. And the phenomenological and philosophical literature of the 20th and 21st centuries makes it clear that touch is full of complexities, and inspired by the turn to the body and to the recognition of the embodied subject. Emmanuel Levinas, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Jean-Luc Nancy, Jacques Derrida, Michel Serres, Edith Wieselgroth, and lots of others all tackled this complex phenomenon that is touch. And they developed a discourse in which sort of the boundaries between the literal immediate touch and the metaphorical untouchable dimensions of touch start to bleed into one another. So the tactile appears more as a sense of being in the world, a figure of like feeling, relating, and knowing. It's not just sensation, but it appears in different guises, layers, veils, and folds. Wieselgroth explicitly called for a recovery of the manifold meanings of tactility, and she wanted a break with the conventional schematization of tactility as a species of the genus sensation. Gosh, mouthful. So more recently, other theorists, such as Laura Marks, Mark Patterson, Karen Barrett, have continued to develop this figure of the tactile. And I don't have time to give their work full due today, but I do want to stress that this body of literature has managed to expand the reach of the tactile in intriguing ways. So, of course, beyond cutaneous touch or the fingertip feel, the sense of touch also involves synesthesia. It also involves proprioception and the vestibular sense. Together, these inward sensations enable our perception of weight, pressure, balance, temperature, movement, and proximity. And all of these bodily sensations induce sort of our sense of being, of us existing in the world. But there's more to the story. Sort of touch exceeds this world of immediate skin contact and appeals to something a lot more abstract and ineffable. It unfolds further into these deeper, more emotional and affective forms of touching, which involve other bodies, both human and non-human ones. So touch is reciprocal. This means that touching someone also implies both touching and being touched at the same time. So you get touched back. So we can be touched by something, which means that we are feeling, we are affected in some deeper way, even without actual touch or physical contact. So in this sense, the tactile refers both to the toucher and the touch, the human body, and in the context of design, the body of the object, the material body. So it's both a material quality and a sensory phenomenon. And as such, it can be materialized, represented, evoked, and felt. But how to address these different folds or levels of tactility, how to move forward, and how to account for both semiosis and aesthesis, effect and matter in our interactions with objects. So how can we like bolt on different frames of reference and understanding onto each other to make sense of the tactile in design? So design studies is a comparatively young field with few innate theories or disciplinary boundaries. So as a consequence, it borrows heavily from other disciplines. So as a research student in a design innovation department, you become quickly confronted with this endless array of ontologies and epistemologies. And many of these are connected to one of the many turns in the humanities and social sciences. You've had the cultural turn, the linguistic turn, the semiotic turn, the sensory turn, the affective turn, and more turns. But these various turns align to varying degrees with either representational theories or what cultural geographer Nigel Thrift has called the non-representational. These tend to be positioned as having these antithetical and even incompatible ontological and epistemological grounds. So representational theories deal with matters like language, discourse, signification, signs, culture. So in a simple way, humans engage with the world by interpreting and exchanging meanings about the conditions of society. And these are more or less seen as fixed and unchanging. So the representational paradigm has received lots of criticism. It is said that it adopts too narrow a sense of meaning, that it gives too much power to language, that it neglects the matter in materiality, and that it holds on to this two-world ontology, or this belief that there are two independent things, basically things to be represented and the representations. But such criticisms sometimes overlook the extent to which representational theories have expanded the notion of meaning beyond linguistic signification to include feelings, sentiments, passions, actions, emotions, expressions, and discursive practices in the chain of signification. There's a valuable array of concepts and frameworks to explore correspondence between descriptions and reality, and between objects and their effects, such as Peirce's typology of sign relations or Flogg's analysis of figurative and plastic meaning. And these have enabled design researchers to account for the planes of content and expression of artifacts. However, attention to meaning should not sort of foreclose the ability to look into matters of sensation and effect or materiality. These have since the mid-90s been the concern of non-representational theories. They're internally incredibly heterogeneous, but all these perspectives of this so-called affective turn try to account for what falls outside the paradigm of representation, for what's more than human, what's more than textual, for like the multisensory encounters, relations, and interactions in our world. And this work is interested in articulating the movements, the intensities, the entanglements of humans and non-humans. It builds on Deleuze's ontology of becoming, which sort of links the natural and the cultural, the mind and the body, and the cognitive and the affective. Key concepts of this turn are affect and relationality. And these concepts are used to sort of understand the various spheres of experience and modes of perception that are not based in a subject. So affect tends to like refer to the flows in our bodily capacity to act, to affect and be affected. What's more is that affective work also gives equal weight to things and matter and their part or agency in these encounters. So if we follow this line of thinking, a design object is as much a body as we are, and they are an equal part of this entanglement. This is sort of resonates a bit with what I tried to describe in the beginning of my talk, that sort of felt intensity of the tactile that sort of emerges when you're interacting with objects. So it appears that the notion of affect is invoked to touch on something that lies outside discourse, outside the practices of the speaking subject. It's about something that's ineffable. It implies that there's something beyond signification or representation. Like there is a sort of a presence that meaning cannot convey, or as others have described it, an aesthetic excess or a pathetic moment of exposure to something unexpected. Or if you follow Grema, a rupture of an isotopy. So but I think that insisting on these dichotomies between aesthesis and semiosis and perception and meaning is not really productive in the context of design, which is a field that is mainly concerned with imagining what not yet exists with the future. So I'm trying to make a case for like the convergence of meaning and effect in design studies. Like subject, object, matter, and meaning are not these separate, fixed ontological entities that are out there in the world for us to find. They emerge together and they co-constitute each other. They are what Karen Barrett has called interacting with each other. They are constantly changing and taking on different configurations as life unfolds. So to explore this, this figure of the tactile, I think that the design researchers should depart from this relationality and open themselves up to these various planes of sensation and perception and different readings and effects. I think the challenge is not in the antithesis between effect and meaning, but sort of in the synthesis that such analysis require. And I'm going to attempt to illustrate this by two examples. The first one is by Charlotte Kingsnorth, and the second one is by Marija Puipaitė, who is going to talk after me. So I hope I don't completely hit the ball wrong, but I'll start with my big fat sofa. This is designed by Charlotte Kingsnorth. She's a designer maker in London. So the chair has a timber frame, it has foam and velvet upholstery, and it's wrapped in latex sheeting. It was inspired by obesity, and that was not so much like a critical comment on our modern diets, but it was rather by the way that heavy bodily matter can merge with a piece of furniture. So Charlotte felt attracted to the visceral tactile qualities of Jenny Saville's painted bodies, as in her nude self-portrait Propped. So it's about sitting for so long that your body and the chair become one and take on a new form. The pink foam upholstery represents this obese, voluptuous body with its layers of skin and the rolls of flesh. In that way, it works iconically, but in assuming these effects of gravity on a fleshy body, the drooping and sagging rolls of foam that spill over the frame, it's also indexical. So on the plane of expression, you could say that the piece contrasts this rigid skeleton with more malleable upholstery. Flexible, mutable materials such as foam and velvet adapt to the body of the sitter, but these types of materials also tend to shape the body, they act back. So when you see the materiality of this chair, you're reminded of your own physicality, of like the fleshiness and at times heaviness of your own body. These sensations then mix with your cultural specific thoughts about obesity, weight, and fat bodies. So seeing materialize what is normally only felt within your own body can be shocking and possibly nauseating. It reveals what is usually hidden and forces you to engage with it, to touch it. This visceral response may, for some of you, be similar to discomfort, the same type of discomfort you may feel when you see an image of a needle going towards an eyeball. But anyhow, you are affected by the chair without necessarily physically reaching out and touching it. If you then move closer and you see this latex, you are instantly reminded of tactile information from previous encounters. These are both cultural and corporeal. So as a rubber substance, latex is associated with tackiness and stickiness, caused by bodily fluids often. It has these fetish connotations and a rubbery smell, so it can evoke quite negative, possibly disgusting sensory experiences. The surface feel of latex affects some of us positively and others negatively. When seen, the chair produces, in a way, tactile effect from a distance. But then when you sit down in this chair, the upholstery is displaced by the flesh of your body and it bulges around you. And the body of the chair pushes back and you become aware of movement, of your balance and the intensity within your body, the shifting of your weight and flesh. And by sitting in the chair, you feel yourself differently in space. You might feel awkward with yourself and with your own bodily presence or with the closeness of other bodies. It can make you think of how others might be impacted by your bodily presence. So my big fat sofa is very enveloping. The soft curves form like a shell which matches the shape of the body. And this body is wrapped in depth and width. And as your feet hover over the floor, your senses of balance and posture are challenged. Because the body of the chair is too big in comparison to your own, it feels a bit claustrophobic. The enveloping hug also feels a bit calming, comforting, and therapeutic, like when you're sitting in someone's lap as a child. But it can also be alienating and uncanny. as you are forced to give over control and allow the chair to hold your body in a different way while your feet are off the ground. The tactile effect is fully realized through a movement from touching to feeling. You start to feel with the chair and with what it represents, and touching becomes a feeling with, a sort of empathy or sympathy. The second example I want to talk about is Envision Comfort, which is designed by Marija and Puipaitė. I hope I said that correctly. She will talk in a minute, but I interviewed her last year about this piece. So I'll try to analyze what I've taken away from it, but I'm happy for you to fight back on it. But anyhow, so this is a chaise longue. It consists of a structure of beechwood held together with wood and brass clasps, and it has a furry seat. This is the first prototype from 2018, when the duo sort of were invited to contribute a piece to an exhibition on the theme of fantasy, whilst sort of the conceptual grounding of this series has moved on now. This first piece came forth from Marija describing an imaginary sensation of utter pleasure and comfort, like how it would be if you were not yet born, if you were still in the womb. So we could say that the implicit topic of this piece is touch, this type of full embodied proprioceptive touch. Touch is the first sense to develop in the womb and is therefore sometimes considered as the most primitive sense, like the one that all our others are built on. This chaise longue tries to materialize that feeling of womb-like comfort we can never remember, but only ever imagine. So this preoccupation with physicality and this reliving and experiencing body is a central thread in Marija's design work. Her designs emerge from an attempt to understand what kind of sensory physical relationship she wants to have with an object, and touch is crucial in this process. So she doesn't really design shapes because shapes are subjective. She uses her body and its movement to make shapes and define her objects. So in doing so, she's starting from a point we all naturally and instinctively relate to. We all have a body and we all are a body. And it's in this precognitive or pre-individual relationship with bodies that tactile effect arises. So while this chair is not really departing from an explicit representational concept, the search for physicality and the grounding in the human body results in a sort of iconicity in the way the soft seat evokes the lines of a human body. And then on the plane of expression, the chaise longue also contrasts an organic round shape with a sort of complex and intricately layered structure of joints and fittings. Whilst this might look like a sharp juxtaposition, both parts suggest a sort of weightlessness and lightness. The dense wooden structure at the bottom reminds us of scaffolding or the skeleton of a skyscraper reaching for the skies. When put together, the chair suggests like this sensation of being lifted, of the body being supported and held up, unlike the heaviness that we saw in My Big Fat Sofa. So moving closer, you see that the seat is covered in the skin-colored synthetic fur, which evokes softness and warmth. Fur is undeniably tactile. It suggests skin because without skin, there is no fur. So being artificial, it's not visceral or mushy like animal skin. It has all the connotations of this pet-like comfort or soft toy innocence. So it reinforces this demand for a physical relationship, but it has none of the potential revulsion of skin. So as you then like lower your body in the chair, the visual promise of comfort and weightlessness is realized, but only partially. The seat does provide a comfortable, soft but stable surface for the reclining body. However, unlike My Big Fat Sofa, which holds the body in this enveloping hug, the chaise longue involves a different type of body lift, a sort of non-enveloping and unfinished one. So lying back, the chair supports and balances the body from head to toes. So it engages the proprioceptive and vestibular dimensions of touch, but there is no displacement, no weightiness of the body. The body feels long and light, but also a bit immobilized to some extent. It's held still in space from below, but only from below. So you are exposed from above, like on a dentist chair. You're not wrapped in this cocoon of safety and comfort as the figure of the womb evokes. So the fantasy of womb-like pleasure stays on the surface. The chaise longue does induce tactile effect in a different way. sort of the materiality affords this soft cutaneous tactility, and the overall structure gives us this inward oriented sense of lightness. So whilst the promise of womb-like comfort might not be fully realized when actually used as a chaise, the piece evokes this energy and tactile effect that speaks to the physicality of our bodies, and perhaps for some to the unbearable lightness of being, and for others to the sensation of being rooted, supported, and safe. So in conclusion, these two pieces differ on the planes of content and expression, and they evoke different tactilities. In both, it goes beyond the sensory surface or the feel and look and feel. And it goes about, it unfolds into other dimensions of touch that shape our feeling of embodiment. So the tactile is experienced somatically, cognitively, and affectively. So the apparently antithetical fields of meaning and effect constitute different ways of sensing and knowing, and enable us to grasp how these various folds of tactility are expressed in design practices and outcomes. So I don't want to claim that I want to resolve or even explain this sort of ineffable moment of like tactile access, but I do think it's possible to make some sense of our aesthetic interactions with design objects by nurturing this sensibility towards their complex layering of meanings and effects. And perhaps by learning to unpack these aesthetic experiences, we may be able to design a future in which we are more in touch, both with ourselves and with the material world around us. Thank you very much for listening. I don't really know how the Q&A goes now, or whether we move on to the next speaker. Yeah, okay. Any questions in the room? I don't know if I can see questions on the chat.
Hello. Thanks for a really nice presentation. My question is a little bit technical. You were speaking about tactile dimension, but you didn't mention haptic.
No.
How do these relate to each other?
I'm still figuring that out, but for me, the haptic it's very much a term that's applied in applied engineering to refer to and robotics and technology and the development of sort of simulating what touch might feel like in other worlds. Whereas I think I have adopted this term of the tactile because it aligns more with sort of the phenomenological and philosophical sort of literature, where it's more than just bodily sensation, where it goes into more metaphorical dimensions as well. So I think there's an overlap there, but I think the haptic will remains quite confined to the sensory body, to perception, rather than to the further elements I'm trying to get to that effect and so on. But it's a very good question, and I think I do need to clarify the terminology. Thank you. Oh, yes, hi.
Kind of in the same vein, this might be also a bit of a broad question, but thinking about, I guess, design futures and whatnot, because like these two, are super interesting examples, but also I think like when people use furniture or whatnot, it's probably one of the rarer, objects these days that we're used to interacting with physically. Like we're already in a mindset where we're willing to be physical bodies touching something, but especially now as technology moves further and further from physical perception to mostly visual and auditory perception. I guess, what would you see as like a path forward for even just getting people back into the mindset of being bodies, let alone designing for bodies, with new technology?
With new new technologies. Yeah, God, good question. There's a lot in there. So yeah, I've sort of explicitly for my research trying to focus on physical objects, but I know technologies is a really important field now, and I know in aesthetics and other field in design as well, there is sort of this push to design for experience, user experience, and for user needs and desires. Where was I going with this? And there are also other fields that really try to stimulate this sort of idea of like soma aesthetics, or sort of practices like meditation, yoga, or Alexander technique, where we learn to become more aware of our bodies. But I'm trying to look whether there are principles in how physical objects have been designed, like in quite avant-garde pieces like these, to see if we can create enhanced perception that way, whether there are aesthetic categories that we can develop that designers can potentially bear in mind when designing for something. I haven't dared to sort of tackle the new technology area yet, because I feel like there it's often about simulating what we can feel in the real world. And unfortunately, it's never, our technology is not so good that we can simulate that so far. So it's always a huge disappointment. So I wonder whether if we first understand what it's like in the physical world to have that tactile effect I'm talking about, then we can think of how we can create tactile effect maybe with new technologies, but in a completely different way. I think we need to move away from trying to simulate what we can feel in the real world by maybe looking at completely new sensory experiences through technologies, like rather than trying to simulate what it feels like to shoot a gun in VR in the real world, trying to come up with new sensory experiences that we cannot yet sort of conceive because they're not possible in the physical world. Like, yeah. So yeah, I'm just waffling now, but like I can imagine that 100 years ago, like when the first person looked through a microscope, that was suddenly a sensory experience that we'd never had. And I wonder whether we still on this journey with the new technologies of going beyond just the swiping and the simulating and the vibro tactile feedback. Don't know if that answers your question.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I guess reversing the question, kind of, instead of like starting with being a body to then designing for the body, starting with designing for the body to then understand.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. Thank you. You said it clearer than I did, but yeah. Oh yes, hi. Yeah. Yeah, I think yes, I think so. Yeah. So the question is about whether my perception of or my conception of meaning is quite focused on the visual. Yes. You are trying to speak about not about sight, about touch. Yeah. And tactile. Yeah. But the ground is visuality, just sight. Yeah, not practicality, not. Yeah, I think it moves in layers, and I've probably not explained that so well, and I'm still conceptualizing as well, but I think when we interact with an object, it will be visual, and there is something, I think Laura Marx called it haptic visuality, where we touch through the eyes, and I think there are the visual does appeal to the tactile sense. Obviously they're all intertwined, all the senses, and we can't really clear cut them into different pots, but I think there's a tactile effect that can be stimulated by things that we see visually, and I think that happens first, because we don't interact with objects like with our eyes closed, and I think it's when we move close. I was trying to make that clear in sort of the analysis, that as you move closer, other dimensions of touch are realized. So you start from the visual tactility of things, and then as you move closer and you start touching with your hands or sitting down, it sort of unfolds gradually. Does that answer your question a little bit? Yes.
With relation to that point, would you say that maybe the future of this tactile design or something, it's something more interactive and dynamic, like taking chairs? It's not the visual stuff first, but then this other aspect is shaking when you touch it. Then that was the primary.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not entirely sure what you mean with a shaping. Shaking chair. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
This might be the future of this kind of design.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I just chose those two for today, but I am trying to look at different types of design, like rocking chairs, and trying to do similar analysis with things we do have to have another quality relationship with. But yeah, cool. Thank you. Maybe I'll give the word to I don't know who wants to go first.
Change the order of presentation?
No, but Sylvia is not here today, so I was meant to be second. Okay. I guess if we follow that, then maybe Kadri wants to go next, unless Marija wants to follow up first.
Yeah, well, if we need to organize ourselves here, then I just would say that my presentation focuses on written text. If Maja would like to go next to jump in and comment on yours, because it seems to kind of move logically, then I'm glad to be the third one, because I have open questions in the end.
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind, and if Marija is happy to chat.
Yeah, I can give the presentation. There was a terrible sound downstairs, but I think the guy is finished making. I probably don't hear me. Do you hear me?
I think there's some discussion in the room whether we should follow the order of the program.
Stick to the program, actually.
Okay, we should stick to the. If you don't mind, to the.
Because if some people want to join in, I don't know, maybe it's not the case, but this we need to.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry. In case people want to drop into the program and are following the order. So sorry for the confusion, Kadri.
All right. Well, then just I think we will try to kind of keep in mind everything that the first speaker said until Marija gets her turn, and I will then speak about synesthesia meanwhile for some time. I will share my screen, and then we will proceed. So I hope my slides are visible. Okay.
Yes, the slides are visible. Thank you.
Okay, good. Because if they stuck, just let me know. And another brief comment or request is, if there is something that you would like to comment or ask or say then perhaps chat would be the best option, because the sound from the room is kind of very environmental. But all right, here we go. I switched the halves of my talk's title, and now it is Writer in the Woods, the meaning of synesthesia. The writer in the woods is visible in this opening slide, and his name is Valdur Mikita. I'm going to speak about this person a little bit more soon. About myself, I have a doctoral degree from University of Tartu in semiotics from 2017. But at the moment, I am not a practicing semiotician anymore, but I have moved rather towards general environmental humanities. Currently, I work in Tallinn University in a research project titled Estonian Environmentalism in the 20th Century, Ideologies, Practices, and Discourses, which tries to track down the ideas of environmentalism in Estonian culture in general. And so Valdur Mikita is one of my personal targets, I could say. And also this research is associated with Estonian Center for Environmental History, that actually also embraces not only historians, but all humanitarians who are interested in environmental topics. There are more and more of them every day, I would say. And in the beginning of this week, the center organized the second Baltic Conference on Environmental Humanities and Social Sciences. And the third one is hopefully going to take place in Kaunas sometime soon. So this is the background. Books by Valdur Mikita, who is also a semiotician, albeit not a practicing one. He defended her doctoral degree in semiotics in the beginning of the 21st century, and the topic of his thesis was the semiotics of creativity. And he was exploring creative writing, creative ideas in general. And after this, he has shifted towards writing essayistic prose, and which has become immensely popular in Estonian culture, because he is writing in a simple style, he is writing in a very appealing manner, and it's also a very multi-layered text. So everyone and anyone can find something in these texts that touches his or her soul. And I will just read out a characterization of Valdur Mikita by another Estonian writer, cult writer, Andrus Kivirähk, who says, in translation of Adam Cullen, of course, anyone who wishes to criticize Mikita's theories can find many loose ends to sink their teeth into and tug at, and then spitefully unravel the whole fabric. But to what purpose? Mikita's writing is above all myth, and myths are not criticized. Myths really shouldn't be taken very seriously. Otherwise, they become obsessions and an official religion. It is true that Mikita has these traits that kind of make his work feasible to be used as a myth, or even a religion celebrating sedentary nationalism. But I don't think it is the case, and I really think this warning not to take his writings too seriously is apt in one sense. But actually, I do think that still his writings deserve further insight, as they are so very appealing. And so far, the critical response to Mikita's work has been also very myth-making, or then myth deconstructing. But my aim is to look at one very small particular aspect in his work, namely how he depicts synesthesia, which should also have a relevance to the topic of today's conference. When we look at Mikita's books, then he started with a book titled Wild Linguistics that was basically really a language and language theory centered book that was a rewriting of his doctoral thesis for wider public, I could say so. But from there on, basically, he has been a very prolific writer, publishing a substantial book every second year, basically. Starting with the Linguistic Forest in 2013. Here you already have some catchwords, catchphrases, such as accelerator of consciousness. And then this linguistical magical approach is taken to the next level in his following book, Birdistics, or Off to the Woods with Linguistics, where he combines nature, natural experiences, and linguistics, the origins of language, somatics, into a really intense array of fireworks of ideas, I would say. From there on, in 2017, The Art of Listening to a Cantarell focuses more precisely on forests. As you probably might know, the past several years in Estonia have been spent in the so-called forest war, where the state wants to cut more than the people living nearby the forests actually would permit to do. So this is a discrepancy that is not characteristic to Estonia alone. This forest war has been waged in Finland, in Western Europe, in many other places, in Poland, in Belovesia, for example. It is just that Mikita has strongly entered this situation, and both the Art of Listening to a Cantarell and also Jeremiah, Estonian Nature, the Epoch of Suffering from 2018, are his contributions to the forest war and his very eloquent speeches on behalf of old growth forests, and the idea that they not only have biological importance, but they are also a very big cultural importance, and they should be protected therefore. Then in 2019, he has returned to his initial interest in linguistics. And there is a really nice book, Mikita's language primer, The Umwelt of an Indigenous Language, which I will be quoting, hopefully, because there he goes back to onomatopoeia and synesthesia in a more in a deeper manner than in his previous books. And then finally, last year, saw the publication of a really nice souvenir book. It is in 3 languages, English, German, and Estonian. For Estonia, Estvald, mine metsa, go to the forest. That contains hand-picked pieces from his earlier work that are trying to somehow explain the local Estonian identity in connection with the local natural environment. Then our main topic today, synesthesia, is quite simply put a phenomenon, a psychological phenomenon, where a stimulation of one sense leads to simultaneous experiences in some other senses. And the most common one, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, is seeing letters or numbers in color, or days of the year, days of the week, or months, or whatever abstract information we might have, kind of attaching colors, or in some cases sounds, to it in one's mind. But as it is said, it can also embrace sound, color, tactile, emotion, spatial sequence, and other conjunctures that are triggered by the occurrence of one of those senses that kind of brings along sensations by other senses that normally we would not think would belong to this realm of sensation. Also, this synesthetic experience or synesthetic capability, it can be regarded as a special ability and celebrated, but more often in the past, it has been regarded as a certain disability, and its close relatives are autism, schizophrenia, things like that. Although, as Mikita claims, synesthetic experience does not bring along anything harmful, actually. And in current knowledge, synesthesia is regarded to have a genetic basis, genetic inclination, and also it is quite technically explained by an excess connections between brain's areas that are responsible for processing different types of stimuli. So it has some neurological and genetic and biological and firmly scientific, we can say, grounds, and it has been proven that this sort of ability or capability in humans generally exists. What Mikita says in his works is that he proposes that in early childhood, we all are capable of synesthetic experiences, and that it is kind of erased off as we are culturalized into beings with with a capability of abstract thought. So that's it. But and now when we go on with this childhood, then there is an excerpt from Mikita's book For Estonia, where which he has titled "Childhood on a Strip of Asphalt." He says, a modern-day child acquires information about the surrounding world primarily through seeing and hearing, senses that are clearly overburdened. At the same time as the old brain, it means smells, tastes, and touches, is nearly switched off. And this is something that effectively numbs our experience of the surrounding environment. This is something that has been written about extensively in the concern that children who grow up with smartphones and tablets are not able to perceive the world with all of their senses, and their bodily capabilities also lessen. So Mikita definitely celebrates his own childhood in countryside, which involved solitude by the edge of the forest, climbing all the highest trees in the neighborhood, making hay, walking in the bog, all sorts of tactile bodily experiences in a natural environment. And here is where we get closer to his special sense of forest. and how the forest can act as a tractor for synesthesia, as he puts it. From linguistic forest, I've translated a small excerpt, The Dance of the Bark Beetles, where he sees that even as a grown-up person, sometimes I like to look for the patterns of dance underneath the tree bark in the forest, made by the bark beetles. They resemble ancient pictograms. You can actually secretly dance to them. And then he goes on, dance patterns can be assembled of clouds, cracks in soil, fallen pine needles, earrings on the tree stumps. You can find a pattern, a natural pattern in the woods, and then through this sort of somatic immersive experience, you can start gesturing and dancing to these patterns. Now, looks a little bit weird, doesn't it? But how? What to make of it then? Here is another excerpt from Forestonia, titled "The Forest Library," and I think we could take a look at this excerpt as well. And I would say that this one here does not sound esoteric in any way, because this actually presents only biological facts that you can measure in a quantitative way, and that probably can be measured and proven that they might have a quality to the sound of the trees. I'll just read it out loud so that you can think along. Swaying in a treetop in blustery winds is also the source of my desire to occasionally listen to trees. Different trees make different sounds in windy weather. And once you enter that southering, a whole unique world unfolds before you. The sound depends on the strength of the wind, the nature of the gusts, the species of the tree, its size, and the shape of its crown, but also on whether the leaves are young or old. Spring and autumn trees have somewhat distinctive songs. Every now and then, you'll encounter a highly musical tree with an exceptionally idiosyncratic melody. The magic of trees rustling may also be tied to the fact that wind causes them to emit a very deep tone that leads one into a trance-like state. Again, I think this is something that most people in our contemporary world very seldom do. Listening to the trees, comparative listening to trees. And unfortunately, not many people have tried to put it into words. Sometimes some nature writers whom I have been studying at an earlier stage on MA level, you might find passages like that. People who walk in nature, who pay attention to it, and then try to convey their own personal experiences in nature to wider readership through written texts that have also belletristic ambition. And I think this is something that people should do more often. Just stand outside and listen to the trees. Perhaps then this all talk about synesthesia and the somatics of tree language, as Mikita puts it, and the dance to the bark beetles patterns would not sound as alien to us as it might sound today. And here, just a couple of quick remarks to wind it up. First, his remarks about onomatopoeia, or then he prefers to use other words in Estonian because he thinks onomatopoeia is a really clumsy word, sound-induced vocabulary, I might say. And this is something that in semiotic terms could be explained as sound iconicism, where sounds are made to be similar to the ones that you hear in the nature. But Mikita says that it's not only about sound or iconic similarities. He claims onomatopoeia is often mistakenly understood as mimicking the sounds of nature. Oh no, it's actually mimicking the body of a bird, an animal, or wind, the movement. These are words of imitation where sounds are accompanied in a natural manner with gestures, as a human using onomatopoeia is mimicking. It is an amalgamation of sounds and gestures. It is just that the part of gestures has worn off over the course of time. That's what he claims. Probably it is true as we communicate more and more in the form of written text, where it is kind of hard to convey gestures that we have in natural talk. And now the final slide and the final questions. And here I hope that semioticians in the auditorium would have their own ideas to help me out here, because I am not a devoted Persian myself. And my understanding of the Persian categories of firstness, secondness, and thirdness are quite short and simply put here on this slide. Firstness could be understood as a precondition for perception, human or perception by humans or any other living organism in that matter, for that matter. Then secondness would be distinctive perception, something that kind of helps us to conceptualize whether we listen, we see, we touch, we feel. And this is already this kind of abstracted categories of perception, it seems to me. And then thirdness would be mediated perception, something that we can read in a book, for example, or listen to in a presentation. And when I think of how Mikita presents synesthesia in his work, it seems to me it remains somewhere between the categories of firstness and secondness, because it is not a distinctive perception. It is merging different perceptions. And as Mikita himself has confessed, that it is really hard to put this synesthetic experience into words. And he even says that he has tried to verbalize this experience from the very beginning of his writer's career, from his doctoral thesis on. And he says that he constantly fails. He can't do this. Now it's up to us as readers to judge whether he has failed or not. But I think that definitely he is drawing our attention to a really important problem that is somehow going beyond all different abstract categories, as we as semioticians are especially keen to establish. And the question is, how do we make sense of all of this? Because I think this phenomena exist, but the question is, how do we conceptualize them? And here I hope that you can help me with your remarks. Thanks.
Hi, I'm back again to moderate a little bit. Thank you, that was really interesting. I'll see if there are questions from the from the room? I can repeat them so you can hear them if necessary. Anyone? Is there any in the chat?
Yeah, but I think I will be looking at the chat anyway. So if anyone would like to express their concerns or comments or say, oh, we have something similar in our literature, then I'm glad to read the chat.
Yes, there's a question from.
I wonder if you can hear me from here.
Can you hear him?
Very vaguely.
Very vaguely. Maybe if you come a little bit closer.
Already any sort of perception which memory when I habitually meet the objects of perception, dimension of memory. Most perceptions already are.
I'll try to summarize that, but the gentleman sort of said that there's a bit of a problem with the thirdness and defining it as mediated perception, because it's sort of, because all perceptions are in some sense mediated, because all of them, there's an element of memory in there. Maybe, yes, maybe if you
Hello, Kadri.
Hey.
So my point was simply that thirdness, I think it's not quite as simple as to say that this is mediated perception as in literature, but rather perception itself already has the element of thirdness, because for Peirce it's mostly related to this term habit. So whenever there is memory and habit and regularity in interpreting something, this would be the realm of thirdness for Peirce. So whenever we see an object of perception that we already habitually identify somehow in a specific way, this would be thirdness.
Okay, yes, here, thank you. I had my I had my secret weapon here, but the book, the Estonian handbook of semiotics, where we have a chapter on Peirce and his categories, and it seems to me I definitely agree with what you say. And in case of this synesthetic experience, as described by Valdur Mikita, I think the component of regularity is not always there. It's kind of unexceptional. It cannot be kind of perceived in advance, or sometimes this synesthetic experience just comes and takes you by surprise. And you're not prepared. There's nothing to do with the habit. So it still is somewhere between those categories, I think. And as Mikita tries to verbalize it in his essayistic manner, that is certainly symbolic mediation of this experience.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. I just wanted to come and have a dialogue on that for a second, because I've also, my research is in music, and I've also read on synesthetic experiences in music. And it's interesting that for music psychologists, the criteria for synesthesia is precisely its sort of repeatability and predictability with the subject, so that synesthesia only exists for them if in empirical studies it is predictable and repeatable. So there's an interesting shift here between a sort of how they conceptualize empirically studying synesthesia and this sort of creative synesthesia, which can come by surprise. And I think that's really interesting, and that's something I would like to also explore, because I also feel that synesthetic experiences are an avenue for creative interpretation rather than this sort of even mechanistic model of that sometimes in neurology and psychology we meet. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that at some point Valdur Mikita can come and act as a plenary speaker himself to explain what he actually means by this.
Yeah, that would be lovely. But I'll just check. Are there any other people who have a question? Kadri, was there anything else you wanted to point out or ask of the audience?
Well, I think we can now proceed to our third talk, and perhaps if we will have time at the end of the session, we could kind of come together once more. But yeah. Thanks a lot, and thanks for the comments. They were very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadri. Marija, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
I'll give the word to you.
Thank you. So thank you for inviting me to this conference, and Sophie made a very beautiful introduction already. So I'm gonna go also in this direction. I'm gonna dive in a design field. And what I did for this presentation, I looked at my works in a quite retrospective way and made some sections which could be an interesting aspects to look at if we look and if we analyze design objects. So a few words about myself. I'm a practitioner mainly, designing limited edition, usually handmade objects, and also I curate design exhibitions, and also I'm a PhD student at Vilnius Academy of Arts in Design. So now I'm gonna share my screen. Yes. Wait a second. I have a damaged screen on my computer, so I'm having sometimes problems with finding what I need. Just a second. Yes. Okay. First slide. There are two things that interest me in design. How does the object turn the way it is, and what kind of relation it has with the user? This was my first attempt to express how I feel being a designer, giving shape to objects. I looked for some given phenomena, or you can call it a reason for a shape and for a function. I also looked for the ways how to achieve the continuity from making the object to using it. Embracing Touch, that's the name of this project, was about the designer's relationship with the works and the designer's presence in them. A design object is a matter, tangible and desirable, that carries meaning in itself, in its body. It's what you can understand and experience through physicality. It's like a garment that you can try on, see how it looks on you. Behind this matter stands a designer, more in the sense of a maker here. Do we think how much intimacy, the personality they leave in the design? Would it change our perception meeting the author, facing the fact that a designer is a physical body made from flesh, having certain physiology, particular volume, smell, breath? Does this information create an intimate personal relationship with the user through the object? And does this intimacy attract or repel? These were the first questions that made me find my creative methods. This led me to continuous practice through sculptural objects, investigating the shape and suggestive functions the body can provide. It's about forms following the body, becoming like an extension of the body. So instead of deciding what kind of form the earring can be, as here, I look at the shape of the earlobe. Material and its specific characteristics, as here you can see the wooden grains, can lead the way in the design process as well. It's basically a folk artist approach when you start from the material instead of knowing what you want to make from the beginning. A wooden board became a bench, so it influences, as here, the shape, and also it suggests the function of a piece. Another thing here is the tactile quality. I can say that from my observations from the exhibitions, observing people, I can say that a wooden surface mainly attracts people instinctively to touch it. The process. I like to look at the process as a ritual. It should have at least a bit of a meaning. Looking at this bowl, you not necessarily know the way it is made, but I believe that at least sensually you can relate to it. Here I worked together with a ceramic artist who turned a bubble on a pottery wheel while I made the cavity by pressing an elbow or a knee in a bubble. Sophie already presented like the first prototype of this project. But I would like to elaborate on its technical side. It's a series of objects based on construction that allows a wide variety of shapes. More elements you have, more precise curves you can get. On the one hand, it looks as a very complex object with lots of details. On the other hand, not like other soft furniture, these are completely honest and openly show how it is built. The rhythmical construction forms a fluid shape into an ergonomic entity. I would like to think that this transparency gives a cognitive satisfaction, and getting to know an object makes it simply familiar for us. The surface, the traces. This is a more recent experiment I did. I upholstered sculpted shape with velvet, a material with strong historical and sensuous connotations. I'm currently interested in worn out objects, places, surfaces as embodiments and signs of touch of the worn, lived, used, prayed. Let's say what we find in the churches usually, like the surface of the staircases and so on. Surfaces and places that gather traces of a human being. Typologically, this work reminds actually of a hybrid piece. At once, it's a seat, it can be a toy, or maybe it's a garment. And in a way, this is the future, what I would like to think, what I would like to investigate further. It's the inwards. The constitution, meaning the composition of the object, what lies behind the representative surface. Is it a polyurethane foam inside of wooden structure? or maybe a seaweed, as in the historical furniture we can find, or sawdust, like in an antique stuffed animals. It is the most intangible aspect, probably, when we look at the objects. However, I believe it can twist the meaning. It can carry the weight of the piece. Despite looking the same, it can make the difference between a prop and a real object. And I would like to finish my presentation with a beautiful piece of art. Sophie probably knows it, because it's a Belgian artist, Belinda de Bruikere. And this work is from 2013. It was shown in a Venice Biennale in a Belgian pavilion. You would enter a large hall in a twilight and would see an enormous fallen tree trunk with a sand sacks and some pieces of textiles around it. You would feel a very present, almost sacral smell of wax. But despite an obvious smell and too bizarre looking tree, your vision would trick you, and without reading the used materials, you would never guess that it's actually an enormous wax reproduction of a tree trunk. Uneasy feeling strikes that here is something very bodily. Installation disturbingly resembles the muscles, tendons, and bones of the human form. No artificial light, only covered skylight from above. The viewer is both mesmerized and puzzled, trying to smell, to touch the artwork, to read the description, and to come back again and to figure out what it is actually. The monstrous, melancholic, poetic work speaks of death, decay, and dashed dreams. And actually, de Bruikere has incorporated the iconography of Saint Sebastian here in this work, the most important protector from plague in Venice. Saint Sebastian, who is often shown tied to a tree and shot with arrows. Only here, Saint Sebastian is no longer tied to the tree. He has become the tree. So I wanted to wrap up my presentation with this work because it shows really beautifully how an artwork, or in general the materiality, can simply affect us sensually, but also, yeah, like mainly sensually, first of all, and without even knowing the concept behind, you are stuck by it. Thank you.
Hi, that was really great. Thank you so much. I'll first see if there's questions from the room. Yes. Yeah. Do you want to come closer?
Yeah, you should come closer because I don't hear anything in the back.
Hello, I'm kind of a designer myself and also an artist. And there was always this conflict between function and, let's say, aesthetics of a piece of design. And usually the meaning is usually related to the function, like the object that you are designing solves some kind of problem that the person sitting, eating, whatever. You create an artifact that helps you do that. But, in that sense, the other meanings that the object could have are somehow laid down. Do you think that this concept, and I would like to have a more expanded notion of this sensuality that you mentioned, and how it could help to solve this imbalance between the function and the aesthetics of a designed object?
Well, I guess what I try to achieve with my works, first of all, is to have a powerful material object by itself without any description even. So thinking about senses, about the sensuous understanding, I believe I can achieve that. And then, yeah, like the second thing that is very important is to create some sort of rules for myself. In a way, it's like my playground, and not necessarily my first ideas are expressed in the object in the end. But that was just only the beginning, and I also tend to look at the things that are happening in the process. They are very important, as I said. Like I treat it like a ritual, and also if I work with other people, I always try to incorporate them, their work, their physical work, their mental work in the piece. And also, if there is a mistake happening during the process, that can lead the way as well, that can change my first ideas. I don't know, in a way, you have first ideas, you try something, you experiment, and then you see how it affects people, and then you make your own conclusions. Let's say we had a talk with Sophie a year ago, and already from there, like let's say I had some concepts at that moment about my own works, and now when I look back at it, I could say some other things. But the most important thing is, what this piece actually communicates by itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was another question from, would you like to?
Well, hello. First, I would like to thank you for this very nice presentation. I have several questions. Sorry. The first one relates to the sense of olfaction, because you mentioned the materials and the powerful energy they carry with them in terms of touch. I was wondering whether you also tap into and explore the olfactive potential of woods, for example, and different materials you use.
Well, I've been working with, let's say, wood for some time. It was part of my master project. I did some experiments, and I was really interested in a relation between working hand with the material. But let's say specifically, like taking the material, I haven't. Like most of my decisions are quite intuitive. Let's say right now, I'm really interested in velvet, but it happened almost by accident. Already, like for some time, I had some ideas. Even several years ago, I did some experiments. I tried to, for instance, to make the velvet worn out by myself, to shave it. And then I didn't know what to do with it. It was just a material experiment. But now, since I'm investigating more early modern understanding of the body and the materiality, I got already ideas how I could apply it to the object. So it's like back and forth. Sometimes I think with my hands, and then afterwards some thoughts come afterwards, and the other way around. I said I'm a PhD student. I'm doing an artistic research, and it's quite challenging for me being a practitioner. And But I realized that I can allow myself to be faster, let's say, with making, and then analyze what I did, and then come back to the theory, or to see where the practice leads me towards the theory. That's my way of working. But that's thank you. That's a very good point. I could really just elaborate on the materials separately.
Thank you. Another question concerning the process, because you put you stress that you're interested in the process and not the final result. I was wondering whether you make the works and then people choose it, or you discuss with the person and then it's like a co-creation with the person depending on their needs and the way they feel.
Thank you. Well, I have a luxury, I can say, to make self-initiated projects. So usually I'm free to choose my own theme, my way of working, and but I also work as a product designer. I have this experience, and then it's a totally different story. Then you start from the needs of the people, but then you think how you could incorporate your own signature in the piece. You look at the characteristics of a brand, let's say, that you create, that you are creating a product for them, and then but still you try to twist the piece that it would be recognizable as your own.
Thank you. I have one last question, but I don't want to monopolize. So if there are other questions,
I had a question.
but just one last question, really. I was curious about the interacting with the object, whether you have explored the sense of movement. For example, if I have your object and I touch it, it changes. Or is it only static? I was wondering whether you have thought about that.
Yeah, it sounds very complex. I wish I could do that. Well, I believe that each object, no matter what kind of concepts it had, or the process, or like as soon as it ends up in the hands of the user, of the owner, it starts its own life, and it starts to create independent meanings, and it changes. Well, what I like is to use quite precious materials, quite practical ones that can last for, I don't know, for generations, like, I don't know, silver, gold, or wood, and so on. Then I see the sense somehow that it's not only something that serves your function, the function that you need, but also it can have a different meaning. And those materials, they react even with the skin. They react with your body fluids. You definitely affect them, but they age beautifully, usually.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. There was another question in the back.
So many questions.
Yeah, a lot of people are very interested.
I had a question that actually I think ties to some of what we were talking about with Sophie's presentation as well, about, I guess, do you find in your work that there's a negotiation you have to do between the actual materials you're working with and the connotations and meanings assigned to those materials that like your users or your viewers will kind of have? Because like looking at, you know, this Cripplewood project, as you said, it's made of wax, but like when you approach it, it seems very wood-like, and there's this expectation of woodness, you know, and there's a tension there. And then also with your bench, with the kind of ripples on it that people very physically interacted with. I imagine, you know, wood doesn't ripple in that same way, but that connotation of ripples kind of invites engagement with the actual materiality of the wood then. And so I was just wondering, how you negotiate perhaps the tension between those two.
Well, I guess I don't like to lie in my works. Like it is what you see, basically, and usually you see very familiar materials and surfaces that you're used to your own environment, maybe like twisted in a different way. As I said, like I choose the materials quite intuitively, and then see where it brings me. If I need more to look at the in general, like in a cultural meaning of it, or like in this kind of a instinctive psychological way, or do I need to observe people and see how they react, or just simply ask if they like it, or how do they feel? It's also part of my research. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Any final questions for Marija? No. Cool. I don't know if there are any more general questions from the audience for any of the panelists. Otherwise, if there aren't, we could maybe have early lunch. I take that as a yes, unless any final questions. Okay, well, thank you so much, Marija. Kadri, did you want to make any final comments or questions?
Oh, just thanks for everyone for having me, and just wish you and us all a nice continuing conference. It's and congratulations to the organizers for such a nice topic for a conference. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. Thank you both for coming. It's a pity that you're not here to come to lunch with us, but thank you so much. I will close the session here then. Bye.